can't lie anymore. I have to tell the truth." Emma's small voice trembled as she stood in the packed courtroom. Every bench was filled, people leaning forward, holding their breath, waiting for the moment that could change everything. At the center of it all was her mother, Lydia Brooks, the town's beloved, seemingly perfect parent. Emma glanced at Lydia, who sat stiff in her chair, her sharp green eyes drilling into her like knives. Her lips were pressed into a thin, warning line, daring Emma to stay silent. But Emma, clutching a worn stuffed bear under her arm, turned back to the judge. Tears pooled in her big brown eyes, but her voice was steady as she spoke the words that shattered the illusion. "My mom, she's lying. She's not who you think she is." A wave of gasps rippled through the room, murmurs rising like a storm. Lydia's face froze, her expression a perfect mask of shock and betrayal. The judge banged the gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" The air was suffocating. What could a 10-year-old girl possibly say that would make an entire courtroom erupt? And why had she stayed silent until now? The answer lay in the past, 6 months ago, in the quiet town of Maplewood. To the outside world, Emma and her mother had the perfect life. Lydia was a pillar of the community, volunteering, organizing charity events, always smiling, always baking cookies for the neighborhood kids. Emma, with her curly blonde hair and infectious laugh, was adored by everyone. But behind closed doors, their home was anything but perfect. Emma's father had left when she was 3, and it had always been just her and her mother. But Lydia's expectations were impossible, and when Emma failed to meet them, the punishments were cruel. She had learned to hide the bruises, both the ones on her skin and the ones carved deep into her heart. She never spoke about the shouting, the insults, or the nights she went to bed hungry over something as small as spilling milk. To the world, Lydia Brooks was the perfect mother. To Emma, she was a storm waiting to strike. One day at the park, Emma sat on a swing, staring at the ground while her best friend, Katie, laughed beside her. "Emma, are you okay?" Katie finally asked, noticing her distant expression. Emma forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Katie wasn't convinced, but she didn't push. Emma never talked about home. That night, sitting at the kitchen table, Emma gripped her pencil, her math workbook open in front of her. Lydia loomed over her shoulder, arms crossed. "Why is this problem wrong?" Her voice was ice. I don't know," Emma stammered. "You don't know?" Lydia's voice sharpened, and suddenly, her palm slammed down on the table. Emma flinched. "I'll fix it, I promise." "You'd better. I don't raise failures." The next morning, a teacher noticed Emma's disheveled appearance. "Are you okay?" they asked gently. Emma nodded quickly and hurried to class. She had learned long ago that telling adults never helped. They always called her mother. And that only made things worse. Then, everything changed the day she met Mr. Carter, the new music teacher. He was different. Kind. His warm smile made everyone feel special. The first time Emma sang in his class, he told her something no one ever had before. "Emma, you have a beautiful voice." For the first time in her life, she felt seen. "You should join the school choir," he suggested one afternoon. Emma hesitated. "I don't know, my mom might not like it." "Well, if you change your mind, you're always welcome." For weeks, she thought about it. She wanted to say yes, but she couldn't. Then, one afternoon, Lydia had a meeting. For once, Emma didn't ask permission, she just went. Standing in that choir room, singing with the other kids, she felt free. Light. Like she could breathe again. But when she got home, Lydia was waiting. "You went behind my back?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have a daughter who disobeys me?" Emma tried to explain, but Lydia didn't listen. That night, Emma lay in bed, hugging her stuffed bear, whispering through her tears. "Why can't she just love me the way I am?" The next morning, she couldn't focus in class. Mr. Carter noticed. "Emma, is everything okay?" For the first time, she considered telling someone the truth. But fear kept her silent. Until today. Until this moment. Standing in the courtroom, facing her mother, Emma finally found her voice. "I'm fine," Emma said, forcing a smile. But her silence wouldn't last long. One evening, while cleaning out the attic, she stumbled upon an old, dust-covered box tucked away in the corner. Curiosity gnawed at her, and with hesitant fingers, she lifted the lid. What she found inside made her heart race. Photographs. Documents. Pieces of a story that didn't match the perfect image her mother, Lydia Brooks, had carefully crafted. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her mother, everyone's favorite charity organizer, the woman who could do no wrong, wasn't who she claimed to be. For days, Emma carried the secret with her, unsure of what to do. Confront Lydia? Tell someone? The weight of it was suffocating. And now, standing in the courtroom, her confession hung in the air like a thundercloud about to break. The judge leaned forward. "Emma, what do you mean by that?" Emma swallowed hard, glancing at her mother, who sat frozen, her expression a tight mask of barely contained fury. I found something," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Something about my mom. And it's not right." The judge's gaze sharpened. "What did you find?" Emma hesitated, her small hands shaking. It's in the box. I brought it with me." A bailiff stepped forward, retrieving the worn box Emma had carried into court. The entire room held its breath as the lid was lifted. People craned their necks, desperate to see what secrets lay inside. The judge's eyes widened as he sifted through the papers. Then, before he could speak, Lydia shot to her feet. "This is absurd," she shouted, her voice unsteady. "She's just a child, she doesn't know what she's talking about." The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Brooks, please sit down." The tension in the room was electric. Whispers rippled through the crowd as every eye remained locked on the judge, waiting for the next revelation. Emma stared at the floor, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She had done what she needed to do. But the fear of what would happen next was overwhelming. Then the judge spoke. This changes everything." His words landed like a hammer, heavy with implication. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Her fingers dug into the edges of her chair as if bracing for impact. The judge turned his gaze to Lydia. "Mrs. Brooks, we need an explanation for these documents." Lydia stood slowly, her face pale but her jaw locked in defiance. "Your Honor," she said, her voice strained. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. My daughter is confused. She doesn't understand what she's looking at." The judge raised an eyebrow. He gestured toward the papers. "Confused? These appear to be legal documents with your name on them, dated years ago. They tell a very different story from the one you've presented here today." Emma watched as her mother's composure began to crack. For as long as Emma could remember, Lydia had always been in control, always the one who could twist any situation in her favor. But now, she looked trapped. Her eyes flicked around the room, searching for a way out. Before Lydia could respond, the judge turned to the prosecutor. "We'll need time to review these thoroughly," he said. "But on initial inspection, I believe they warrant further investigation." The prosecutor nodded. "Your Honor, I request a brief recess to examine the documents." "Granted," the judge replied, tapping his gavel. "Court will reconvene in 30 minutes." The room erupted into murmurs. People stood, stretching, whispering, trying to process what they had just heard. Emma sat frozen, staring at the table. She could feel the weight of the stares around her, some curious, some judgmental, and a few filled with something that almost resembled sympathy. When the trial had begun 2 weeks ago, Emma had barely understood what was happening. All she knew was that her mother had been accused of stealing money from a local charity. Lydia had denied everything. "They're just jealous of our success," she had told Emma, her voice dripping with righteous indignation. At first, Emma had believed her. Why wouldn't she? Lydia had always been the confident one, the one who had all the answers. But as the trial dragged on, Emma started noticing things that didn't add up. Questions her mother avoided. Details she brushed off with a dismissive wave of her hand. And then, the box. Inside, Emma had discovered old checks, financial records, and legal papers that painted a picture of fraud and deception. The names of charities Lydia had worked with, bank accounts that didn't match up, forged signatures, evidence of a past her mother had tried to bury. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was a document that shattered everything Emma thought she knew about her own life. During the recess, Emma sat in a quiet corner of the courthouse, hugging her stuffed bear. Katie's mom, Mrs. Jensen, who had agreed to accompany her to court, sat beside her. "You're very brave, Emma," she said softly. "What you did in there, that took courage." Emma nodded but didn't speak. Because the truth was, she didn't feel brave. She felt like a scared little girl who had just betrayed her mother. And even after everything Lydia had done, there was still a part of Emma that loved her. A part that still wanted her mother's approval. When it was time to return to the courtroom, Emma hesitated. "What if they don't believe me?" she whispered. Mrs. Jensen placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "They'll believe you. And even if it's hard, the truth is always worth telling." The courtroom was silent as the judge resumed his seat. "I have reviewed the documents presented by Emma Brooks," he announced, his voice measured but firm. "They contain evidence that may implicate Mrs. Lydia Brooks in multiple instances of financial misconduct." He paused, his gaze shifting toward Lydia. "And furthermore, there are serious questions regarding Emma's guardianship that require immediate clarification." The air in the room turned ice cold. Lydia shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is outrageous. Emma is my daughter. No one has the right to question that." "Sit down, Mrs. Brooks," the judge ordered, his tone sharp. "You'll have your chance to speak." Emma's stomach churned. The walls of the courtroom seemed to close in around her. Guardianship? What did that mean? She had thought the documents were just about the stolen money. Had she missed something? The judge turned to her, his tone softening. "Emma, can you tell us how you found these documents?" Emma swallowed hard. I found them in the attic. I wasn't looking for anything. I just found them." The judge nodded, his expression kind. "Thank you, Emma. You've done the right thing by bringing them forward." Lydia sat rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the defense table. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Lydia wasn't listening. Her cold, unblinking stare was locked onto Emma. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Emma had been a wreck. After finding the box, she spent nights lying awake, torn between fear and the gnawing feeling that she couldn't stay silent. Every time she considered telling someone, she heard her mother's voice in her head. "Family sticks together. No one will ever care about you like I do." But deep down, Emma knew that wasn't true. Mr. Carter cared. Katie cared. Even Mrs. Jensen, who had barely known her, had shown more kindness in a single afternoon than Lydia had in years. And it was those small acts of compassion that had given Emma the courage to do the unthinkable. One rainy afternoon, she had walked into the police station, gripping the box with trembling hands. "I think this might be important," she had told the officer at the desk. The officer had taken one look at the contents and taken her seriously. Within days, Lydia was arrested. Emma had been placed in temporary care with Mrs. Jensen while the investigation unfolded. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Now, back in the courtroom, the judge turned to Lydia. "Mrs. Brooks, you are facing serious allegations, both criminal and civil. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Lydia stood, her posture stiff and proud. "Yes, Your Honor. This is all a misunderstanding. My daughter is being manipulated. Someone planted those documents to frame me." A wave of whispers swept through the courtroom. Emma's face burned. Manipulated? How could she say that? She hadn't been manipulated, she had seen the truth with her own eyes. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room. The court will review further evidence before making a determination. But for now, Mrs. Brooks, I advise you to think carefully before making any additional claims. Emma exhaled slowly. For the first time, it felt like her mother's lies might not work. But then, the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, he said, holding up another document from the box. I believe we've just uncovered something even more concerning. He hesitated, glancing at Emma. The judge's brow furrowed. What does it suggest? The prosecutor took a breath, then spoke the words that turned Emma's world upside down. It suggests that Lydia Brooks may not be Emma's biological mother. The courtroom erupted. Emma's ears rang. Not her mother? She sat frozen, her mind reeling. If Lydia wasn't her real mom, then who was? Gasps and murmurs filled the room, a storm of voices swirling around her, but Emma couldn't process any of it. She turned, wide-eyed, toward Lydia. Lydia didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't deny it. She just sat there, her jaw clenched tight, staring straight ahead with that calculating expression Emma knew all too well. The judge's gavel struck the block. Order. Order in the court. The room quieted, but the air remained thick with tension. The judge turned back to the prosecutor. Continue. The prosecutor held up a faded birth certificate. Your Honor, this document lists Emma Brooks as the child of Jane Doe, with no father listed. It is dated 10 years ago, the year of Emma's birth. He glanced at Lydia. Lydia Brooks is not named anywhere on this document. The judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Brooks, how do you respond to this? Lydia stood, her hands trembling ever so slightly, despite the rigid calm she tried to maintain. Your Honor, I can explain, she said quickly. Emma is my daughter in every way that matters. Yes, I adopted her, but I didn't think it was relevant to bring up. Emma felt like the floor had just dropped out from under her. Adopted? The word felt foreign. Heavy. Lydia had never mentioned adoption. Not once. She had always told stories about Emma's birth, her first steps, her first words, as if she had been there. As if they were real memories. Had it all been a lie? The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Brooks, I suggest you start telling the truth. Because right now, your credibility is slipping fast. Emma sat in stunned silence, her whole world unraveling. For the first time, she wasn't just questioning her mother's honesty. She was questioning everything she had ever known about herself. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. The court will examine the validity of these claims, he stated, his voice measured but firm. However, the omission of this information raises further questions. Why was this not disclosed earlier? Lydia's lawyer immediately jumped in. Your Honor, my client did not believe this detail was pertinent to the current charges. She was merely protecting her child from unnecessary scrutiny. Unnecessary scrutiny? The prosecutor scoffed. Your Honor, the fact that Mrs. Brooks hid this adoption raises serious doubts about her integrity and her motives. Enough, the judge interrupted, his tone sharp. We will address these matters in due time. For now, we need clarity. He turned to Emma, his voice softening. Emma, I know this is difficult, but do you recall anything from before living with Lydia? Emma's throat felt dry. The words barely made it past her lips. No. I don't remember anything. It's always been just me and Mom. Her answer landed like a stone in the silent room. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the courtroom's air conditioning. That night, Emma sat curled up in Mrs. Jensen's living room, knees pulled tightly to her chest. The warmth of the fireplace should have been comforting, but she still felt cold inside. The day's events played over and over in her mind, like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Can I get you some hot chocolate, sweetheart? Mrs. Jensen asked gently, settling beside her. Emma shook her head. No, thank you. Mrs. Jensen gave her a kind smile. It's okay to feel confused. This is a lot for anyone to handle, let alone a 10-year-old. Emma finally looked up at her. Do you think she's my mom? I mean, really my mom? Mrs. Jensen hesitated. I don't know, Emma. But what I do know is that you're incredibly brave. No matter what happens, the truth will come out. And you'll get the answers you need. Emma nodded, but the knot in her stomach remained. She wanted to believe Mrs. Jensen was right. But what if the truth wasn't what she hoped for? What if it meant losing the only family she had ever known? Back in court the next day, the tension was even thicker than before. The prosecutor introduced new witnesses, people who had worked with Lydia, people who had seen what happened behind the scenes. One of them, a woman named Margaret, stepped forward. Mrs. Brooks and I worked together for years, she said. She was charming, persuasive, and seemed dedicated to helping others. But over time, I started noticing discrepancies in the accounts. Money would go missing, and Lydia always had an excuse: emergency repairs, last-minute donations, things that couldn't be verified. Margaret's words painted a picture of a woman very different from the mother Emma thought she knew. The prosecutor leaned forward. Did you ever confront Mrs. Brooks about these discrepancies? Yes, Margaret said, her voice steady. She told me I was imagining things. That questioning her loyalty to the cause was insulting. She let out a bitter laugh. I wanted to believe her. But the evidence was there. As Margaret stepped down, Lydia's lawyer called another witness, someone who defended Lydia, someone who vouched for her kindness and generosity. It was a pattern that had become familiar throughout the trial. One step forward, one step back. For every accusation, Lydia had someone willing to stand up for her. But just as the day seemed like it would end without any major revelations, the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, he announced, holding up another document from the box. We've located a potential match for the name listed on Emma's birth certificate. We request permission to bring this individual in to testify. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. Someone connected to her real mother? She hadn't even had time to process the idea of being adopted, and now she might meet someone who could tell her where she came from. Lydia's face hardened. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're dragging my daughter into a witch hunt. She doesn't need strangers coming in and confusing her even more. Mrs. Brooks, sit down. The judge's voice was sharp. Then he turned to the prosecutor. Bring in the witness. The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. A woman entered. She was tall, with long brown hair streaked with gray. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as if she wasn't sure if she even belonged here. Emma stared at her, trying, desperately, to find something familiar in her face. But there was nothing. The woman stepped up to the stand, her hands gripping the edge of the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She cleared her throat. My name is Sarah Miller, she said, her voice trembling. And I don't know for sure if I'm connected to Emma, but I was told to come forward because the dates and details on the birth certificate match a child I lost years ago. The room went dead silent. Sarah's words were careful, hesitant. But there was a look in her eyes, something fragile, something hopeful, as she glanced toward Emma. The prosecutor handed Sarah a photograph. Do you recognize this child? Sarah's hands shook as she took the picture. Tears welled in her eyes. I think so, she whispered. This looks like the baby I gave birth to. Emma felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Was this woman her real mother? What did it mean if she was? Emma turned, her breath shallow, her heart racing. Lydia sat still. Her face was stone. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't denying anything. She was just watching, calculating, planning her next move. Your Honor. Lydia's lawyer stood abruptly. This testimony is purely speculative. There's no concrete proof of. Enough, the judge interrupted, his patience wearing thin. He turned back to Sarah. Mrs. Miller, are you willing to take a DNA test to confirm your claim? Sarah wiped her eyes, her voice steadier this time. Yes. Absolutely. The judge nodded. Then that is what we will do. Emma's hands trembled. This was happening. This was real. And soon, she was going to know the truth. The courtroom was tense as the judge confirmed that a DNA test was necessary to verify Sarah Miller's claim of being Emma's biological mother. Lydia, for the first time, looked truly afraid. As court adjourned, Emma was left with more questions than answers. That night, lying in bed at Mrs. Jensen's house, she replayed the day's revelations, wondering why Sarah had given her up and why Lydia had kept it a secret. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with reporters. The judge announced that DNA results would arrive within 24 hours, shifting focus to Lydia's financial crimes. Witnesses painted contrasting pictures. Some described Lydia as a manipulative fraud, while others defended her generosity. Emma struggled with the contradiction. Was Lydia a villain, or just a deeply flawed person? During recess, Sarah cautiously approached Emma for the first time. I just wanted to see you, she said softly. Emma, overwhelmed, blurted out, Why did you leave me? Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she explained she had been young, scared, and thought adoption was best. Before Emma could respond, Lydia's lawyer intervened, cutting their moment short. When the DNA results were revealed, the truth was undeniable. Sarah Miller was Emma's biological mother. Gasps filled the courtroom as Lydia erupted, insisting the test was wrong. The judge ordered her to sit down, but her fury was evident. Emma, caught between two worlds, felt her head spin. Lydia had raised her, but Sarah was her real mother. What did that mean for her now? As the court prepared to determine custody, Sarah made a heartfelt plea. I don't want to take her away. I just want her to be safe and happy. Lydia, in contrast, lashed out, claiming she was the only real mother Emma had ever known. But after days of heated debate, Lydia did something unexpected. She stood up in court and admitted, maybe I'm not what's best for her. For the first time, Emma saw Lydia surrender. The judge ruled that Emma would stay with Mrs. Jensen for now, with visitation rights for both women. The courtroom was silent as Lydia whispered, I'll always be here if you need me. As weeks passed, Emma built a cautious relationship with Sarah, learning more about her past while still trying to make sense of Lydia's role in her life. Lydia, in turn, stepped back but remained present in small ways, sending letters, showing restraint, finally letting Emma have space. In the end, Emma realized she didn't have to choose between the two. She could love them both in different ways, on her own terms. And as she sat in the park one afternoon, sketching flowers beside Sarah, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, peace. For the first time, she knew she was going to be okay.